Hello everyone, and welcome to the Festival of Ideas and the University of York. My name is Matt Matravers. I teach here in the law school, although I suspect I'm in the position I'm in not because of my specialist knowledge of the philosophy of criminal law, but because I'm a great admirer of John Crace's parliamentary sketches, and most importantly, I have a dog that I love, possibly obsessively, and who advised me on the questions I could ask John today. So John Crace will be known to all of you. He's the Guardian's parliamentary sketch writer. He's kept us amused for the last 10 years with satirical comment on the nature of our rulers and indeed of the opposition. As well as his unremittingly witty sketches, he's also written around 20 books on everything from cricket to football to TV to literature and politics. And of course, he's famously a Spurs fan, so if there's time, we might get to the latest that's happened. And today, John and I will discuss the state of politics today as he introduces, or I introduce via conversation, his satirical memoir, Taking the Lead, written from the viewpoint of his beloved late dog, Herbie. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to talk to John for about half an hour, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions. So I thought before we get to the book, John, I'm sure everybody in the room has read your sketches, but I wonder whether everybody knows, what does a parliamentary sketch writer actually do? I mean, what does a day look like for you?
Well, first, it's lovely to be back in York. Thank you for having me. I was here at the Festival Ideas sometime in the late, I think it's around about 2018 and pre-COVID. So anyway, it is lovely. And, well, the day begins very much at 7 o'clock in the morning with a sense of panic, really. I mean, exacerbated by current events whereby you're never quite sure what's happened overnight and whether something with Elon Musk and Donald Trump will have kicked off that will knock what you thought you were doing that day off the thing, off target. But my job is partly to entertain, but partly it's a great privilege to be the sort of Guardian satirist, really. I am there to hold the powerful to account. And so that means I'm there to sketch the goings-on of government and of opposition, really, to see how the two interact, how well they're working, what they don't want you to be concentrating on is very much my area of interest. And you're never quite sure what the sketch is going to... It's unique, really, because the Americans don't have sketch writers, the Europeans don't have sketch writers, but for some reason, the UK has 4 of them. And then we have The Guardian, The Times, The Telegraph, and The Mail. And I'm probably never going to get a job at The Times or The Telegraph or The Mail. So I've sort of ended up in a 1 in 60 million chance, really, of the Guardian sketch writer. And yeah, my aim is to try and tell the story of the day as best I can. And sometimes that will be... On a Wednesday, it's generally quite straightforward because unless there's a budget or a resignation, it's going to be Prime Minister's questions. But other days, you don't know what you're going to... It might be a speech... And, I mean, this is something we may get onto, but increasingly it's harder and harder for me to get into speeches. When I first started in January 2014, it was a done deal that the sketch writer was invited everywhere. Now less so. You get operational notes from both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Oddly enough, the Lib Dems are only too happy for you to come. I'm less keen to go.
Okay, well, I think that captures the flavour of what you do. So let's move on then to the book. So the book, available outside from our bookseller, and John will be signing later. I mean, the obvious question to ask, because if you haven't seen it or read about it, the book is told from the perspective of Herbie the dog.
Yes.
But unlike many dog books, as it were, Herbie is not observing. He's actually a participant. He takes phone calls and has a WhatsApp, and at one point is Ed Miliband's spokesperson.
Though I'll have to say that he doesn't drive.
No.
Because his paws can't reach the pedals.
So it's a drawback. So why write the book that way rather than in the first person or in the third person? Or as a person, frankly.
Yeah, good question. Well, it was, I mean, I was looking back because I've now been the Guardian sketch writer for about 12 years, and 2 years ago I was sort of looking back on a decade of, and when I took the job in January 2014, I thought that I was very much signing up for a niche job that, I mean, it was one that I was flattered to do and was keen to do, but it was one that I felt was for politics nerds. That's what I imagined my audience would be. But over the course of the last 10 years, we've had the Scottish referendum, the 2015 general election, the Brexit referendum, the years of Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and now Keir Starmer. And it occurred to me that it had been one long psychodrama, really. And that was the point at which I kind of felt that my dog could have done better than that. And so I then thought, well, what if my dog had been there? What would he have done? And at which point I started feeling sorry for him, because he was born in September 2011. And so he was into his late 80s in human years before he had known a Labour government. And I thought, that's a bit tragic, really, that he had only ever known coalition and conservative chaos. So I just thought it would be a fun way in to looking at the last 10 years, rather than just write a straightforward account. Try and position him as, first of all, an aide to Ed Miliband, then to David Cameron, and then a mate of Dylan the dog, and just see where we went. And it seemed to be a very good way of surviving the last 10 years as well, of making it in a form that didn't want me to make me kill myself by the end of it.
Yeah, I think that's very much the feeling reading it. I mean, one's reminded of certain things that one has luckily in a way forgotten, and all through the eyes of, and indeed participation of, Herbie the dog. So I don't want to go through all of the politicians sort of one by one, but in a sense they're summed up by, this is someone we haven't mentioned before, but Herbie towards the end actually gets in on the late Queen's death at Balmoral. And clearly before she dies, she comments on all these and describes each one of them as a disaster, which doesn't seem unjust. But in a way, the book hints at different explanations of the disaster. So sometimes it seems like it's basically just personality failure.
Yeah.
In many ways, you describe all of them as, in different senses, quite deeply flawed.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, that is one of the privileges of my job, is that I am not there to report the day-to-day goings-on in Downing Street or indeed in Tory central office of who's up, who's doing what, you know, who's on manoeuvres, who's doing this, that, and the other. I can take a much more analytical approach, if you like, and I tend not to be interested in what politicians look like, what they're wearing, or whatever, but I am interested in what motivates them. So I want to make the sketches more an analysis of their psyche, really, how their psyche interacts with the job and why they're doing the things they're doing, not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And as you say, we end up, you know, Herbie at the Queen. And I think this is the point where we have to come and stare reality in the face and say, Liz Truss killed the Queen. I think this is unarguable. Because
if the university's libel lawyers are listening, I can, let me just say it is at least plausibly alleged that.
Yeah, I have written this in the Guardian, I think. So the Guardian's lawyers, it will have gone through the Guardian's lawyers as well. But no, I mean, let's think about it. On the Tuesday, Liz Truss went up to Balmoral to be sworn in by the Queen as Prime Minister. And the last picture we ever saw of the Queen was of the Queen looking absolutely desperate, standing next to the fireplace. And her eyes seemed to be saying, "Get me away from this lunatic." And 2 days later, she was dead. And I have this theory that the Queen just decided that, you know what, it's just not worth it anymore. When I came to the throne in 1952, Winston Churchill was my Prime Minister. That was the kind of, in the days when politicians were proper politicians. And now she had just seen off Boris Johnson, and she thought, God, it's Liz Truss. How did this happen? And, you know, it is time to go. It's time to let someone else have a go. And Liz Truss was singularly, I mean, you're probably quite pleased to have seen the back of her. Frankly, I couldn't get enough of her. I mean, she lasted 49 days, and really, in real terms, that was 39 days, because there was 10 days of national mourning in which Liz Truss couldn't do anything to actively undermine either her own government or the country. But I can remember her launch event for her leadership campaign in July 2022. And this was the point that I just felt, Liz Truss, you can do what you like, just stay in number 10. Because it was she had decided that the first floor building of a hedge fund in Westminster was the place for her launch. And the place was packed because she was the clear favourite to win the leadership. And the front rows were all full of Tory MPs, all looking eagerly up towards her, saying, "Please give me a job." And then there was all us lobby journalists around, and then at the back there were party members, party donors, and that kind of thing. And Kwasi Kwarteng, who was her campaign manager, gave an introductory speech, and, you know, he was quite eulogistic about her, sort of praising her, and then said, "And I give you Liz Truss, our next Prime Minister." And nothing happened. She didn't appear. And there was, you could see that Kwasi was getting a bit twitchy at this point, a bit sweaty. And he thought, oh, maybe if I say the magic words again, she will appear. So he said, "And I give you Liz Truss, our next Prime Minister." Still nothing. And then there was a rattle. She couldn't open the door. And you just can't buy that kind of genius. And
of course, it gets even better because she couldn't find a way out.
Yeah, and that was it was even better because at the end, she sort of moved to walk through the audience and tried to get out the window. And for that, I will always be grateful.
And so, I mean, in a way, as is clear, Liz Truss provides certainly a lot of comic relief for Herbie and for the book at the end. Cameron and Johnson, the analysis is different, and in a way, I don't know whether one would say it's, well, let's just say what it is, and then you tell me. In a way, both of them Herbie finds both of them quite empty. Cameron just seems to sort of have arisen because that's what will happen to people like David Cameron. He's naturally become Prime Minister because he went to Eton and so on. And yet when there, has no sense of really what to do. And Johnson, differently, but still with a sense of entitlement, but with this narcissism and a sense of, you know, being the emperor. But both come across as very empty, I think.
Well, I mean, that was the way that they appeared to me when I was sketching them. There was this sense of David Cameron that it was he had risen to be Prime Minister because it was somehow his destiny, a kind of birthright. And it was almost as though he had no plan for what he wanted to do. And, I mean, there was a kind of carelessness about him as well. And it was a carelessness that impacted the country. And I'm thinking very much of the Brexit referendum here. Because if you remember, you know, he became Prime Minister in 2010 as part of the coalition. And by 2014, we knew there was 1 year left on the clock till the general election, because back then there was something called the Fixed Term Parliament Act, which has obviously didn't survive more than a couple of years as an idea, but did very much back then. So nobody was asking David Cameron in 2014, when are you going to call the general election? Because we all went, oh, Fixed Term Parliament Act, it's May 2015. And you have to remember also that in late 2014, the polls put Labour and the Tories only within a few points of one another at the time. There was no guarantee that the Conservatives were genuinely surprised to win an outright majority in 2015. David Cameron had imagined that the best he could hope for was getting back in another coalition, though whether he would have actually ever been able to form another coalition remains to be, you know, that's sort of one for pundits, really. I don't think the Lib Dems would have gone back into coalition with him again. But back then, the UKIP party, as it was then, had done very well in the European elections. 2 Tory MPs had defected to UKIP, that was Mark Reckless and Douglas Carswell. And David Cameron was just spooked by the right-wing Eurosceptic. I mean, the right-wing Eurosceptics had always been a grumbling, loud, but very small percentage of the Tory party. But David Cameron became very spooked by them. And he felt that his best bet of keeping them on side through the 2015 general election campaign was to promise them a referendum on Europe. And, you know, it worked better than he thought, because Cameron, I don't think, ever had any intention of offering the referendum, because he thought that he was going to either be in opposition or in a coalition. And if he was in a coalition, he could say, my partners won't let me do it. So it was an offer that he had made casually, in no expectation of delivery. But then when he did win the general election, and the Eurosceptics said, what about this referendum? I mean, he had only promised a referendum by the end of 2017. That should have given him plenty of time to prepare the ground, prepare the country, to prepare the country for the arguments he wanted to make. But David Cameron was instinctively lazy. He didn't want to do the work. He looked at the opinion polls, and at the time, the opinion polls suggested that Remain would win quite comfortably. And so he just thought, we'll go for the summer of 2016, just get it over and done with, end it all. And he didn't think it through. And, you know, he was completely outmaneuvered by Vote Leave, who were able to promise anything, because at that stage, Brexit could be anything you wanted it to be. I mean, you probably remember in the Brexit campaign that there were some who were saying, yeah, Brexit is a hard Brexit, leaving the single market and the customs union. And others were saying, no, we can stay in the single market and the customs union, don't worry about it. And, you know, David Cameron never bothered to nail any of this stuff down. And so with the result that he landed us with a Brexit which, like it or not, I mean, most people don't now. A lot of Brexiteers who voted for Brexit in 2016 don't feel that they've got the Brexit they wanted or that they had been promised. And we are taking, you know, we wonder why our economy is still in a mess. Well, a large part of that is due to, you know, the hit to European trade that we took. So that's the emptiness of David Cameron. The emptiness of Boris Johnson is rather different. It was because, sorry.
No, I'm just checking. I know the audience will want to ask questions.
Yeah. I mean, the emptiness of Boris Johnson is much more troubling, really. It's sort of narcissistic. It's the emptiness of a sociopath, really. And so I was always really careful when sketching him. I didn't want to make him the fun guy that he wanted to be portrayed as. I tried to portray him seriously and to kind of look in and to expose the hollow heart, the emptiness of Boris Johnson, that what was really fascinating about Boris is that ultimately he's got no friends. He is, you know, he's one of these people who supposedly go into a room and light it up, but there is no one there close to him. And he is incapable. He betrays. I mean, I think psychologically well people steer clear of him because they know that there is an instant betrayal that will take place at some point and that's always what I was very keen to get across with him.
I mean, the other, just a couple quick questions, and I'll come to the audience. I know you're very keen to participate in the Festival of Ideas, which is wonderful. I mean, the other characters who appear in the book, I think more so than in the sketches, possibly because, with the exception of one, who I'll mention in a second, people don't know about them, is special advisors. So they appear as a kind of background cast, Lucy's, towards the beginning of the book. But then, of course, there is the spectre of Dominic Cummings, who people do know of quite local fame. If you want to test your eyesight, you will know where to go, just north of here. They don't come out well, I think, from start to end. I mean, not particularly Cummings, but the special advisors, the whole kind of background. So Herbie mixes with these people because he becomes, in effect, a special advisor or a spokesperson. And what is your view of them? Because in one way, they must boil the whole system, but in another way, they are sort of slightly in the background. They are people, it appears from your book, quite often on the make. They want political careers of their own. They're quite flexible in their beliefs, let's put it that way. So I just wondered if you'd say a bit more about that sort of background cast.
Well, I mean, if you sort of see Keir Starmer making a speech, there will be 3 or 4 special advisors around him. And I've often, I mean, there is the dichotomy, I think, between what is a good result for a special advisor and what is a good result for the country, really. I mean, I see very much the special advisor's role is to promote the career of their minister or prime minister if they are in number 10. And, you know, because they rise and fall with the popularity and the success of the... So they're constantly plotting, they are constantly briefing journalists, and I'm not sure that that is a kind of healthy part of the political system. I feel quite... I mean, I don't tend to sketch them particularly because it's a bit inside the Westminster bubble, really. I mean, you know, I am sketching for my readers, really, and readers, by and large, know the politicians. They don't know. There's no point doing I mean, with Dominic Cummings was a kind of breakthrough character, whereby he actually became the story in itself, really. I mean, with both Brexit, you know, and his work in Vote Leave, and also when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister and his central role in Partygate.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so I'm going to open it out to you. Do we have elves? We have elves. So there are student elves with microphones. Please do wait for the microphone because it's linked into even if you have a loud voice as I do, it's linked into the hearing system. So please raise your hands. On the back left.
I assume that you meet the politicians whom you treat so cruelly. I'm thinking particularly of the current leader of the opposition. How do they react to you, and have you any particularly amusing encounters to tell us about?
Well, I mean, with Kemi, I haven't really... She tends to keep herself very much to herself. I mean, one of the strange, different things about a Labour government is, because obviously up until July last year, I only ever sketched a Tory Prime Minister. And that meant that I didn't have many dealings with the Tory cabinet because they are off in their departments in Number 10. When they came in to make ministerial statements, they would arrive by ministerial car. So there was no real chance for any personal interaction with them. Whereas, back in, at the same time, you would occasionally bump into Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves in Portcullis House, which is an annex to the Palace of Westminster. And you would have, you could have a small conversation with them. So there was a semblance of a relationship. But that has obviously all changed now because Labour are the ones that are in power. So I haven't seen Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer, to chat to before. But about a month ago, I was walking down the stairs and I bumped into Chris Philp. And my heart sank. And I thought, Chris, please do the decent thing, do the British thing, pretend we haven't seen each other. That would be the way through. It'll save a lot of embarrassment. But no, Chris goes, "Hi, hello, John." And I go, "Hi." "Hello, Chris." Because at that point, I know that he knows that a few weeks previously, I described him as a nose in search of a bum. Which is sort of awkward if you're British.
Did he mention it? No. Right, fair enough. Right.
No, but there was a look that there was an understanding that.
And the gentleman in green here, please do raise your hand so I can line people up if you.
Coming on to really important matters now, being a Spurs fan, as my dear wife is, and what you say, she says all the time, so it must be a very traumatic feeling. Was Ange right to be sacked? Apologies if you're not interested in football.
I'm probably going to make myself really unpopular, but yes, I think he was. I think he won us a cup, which we will forever be thankful for, but he didn't seem to be able, to finish 17th in the league when you've got a big stadium, you've got a big budget, you've supposedly got, a top squad, and I don't think that, I think, Ange might have been able to beat the best of the second best in Europe, by which I mean Manchester United. But he seemed to struggle to beat Ipswich and Leicester. And I'm not sure that would have changed. So, we could be on another roller coaster, we could all be tearing our hair out, but that's frankly what we've been doing for years anyway. And I'm sort of back in my happy, comfortable place now.
It says something about the UK, that as the chair I'm feeling more awkward, that things are going to get brusque now, that we're discussing football than that we were discussing a former minister putting his nose where it was described. But the gentleman in a blue shirt there.
Has Herbie met Mr. Farage yet? And if he hasn't, what might his thoughts be on that meeting?
Well, Herbie's days, I'm afraid that Herbie has died. Herbie died beginning of April. He got cancer and went downhill very quickly. But I think he was spared meeting Nigel Farage, really. Though, I mean, Farage, it's so hard. He's a kind of moving target, really. Every time you think you've got him nailed, really. He has led so many parties and dissolved them and reinvented them. And, I mean, only this week, on Thursday, the chair of the party, Zia Yusuf, decided to stand down. And it was clear that he decided to stand down because he had finally worked out that the Reform Party was racist adjacent. And that probably as a man of South Asian heritage, that wasn't a good look for him either. But I do think that Reform, we need to take them seriously. I know they've only got 5 seats, but at the last election, although Labour won a 170-seat majority, it was a very shallow majority. There wasn't a huge outpouring of love for Labour. I think what the country was really saying was, we've had enough of the Tories and we want somebody different. And, you know, in seats that were 2 ways between Labour and and Tory, Lib Dems lent their votes to Labour to get Labour over the line. In seats that were Lib Dem and Tory, Labour supporters lent their votes. There was a lot of tactical voting that went on. And ordinarily, you would think that a party with 170 seats must have 2 terms in government, because it would feel unthinkable to lose that kind of majority in one election. But I do think it's not fanciful to imagine no overall majority at the next election. And with Reform playing to people's grievances, because that has always been Farage's, you know, his strong point. Play to what people are unhappy about. He's never had a proper solution, and I think it's a big ask for Labour to actually drive positive growth in the remaining 4 years and to make the country feel good about itself. So I think there is going to be a lot of discontent with Labour. But it depends now on whether Reform starts imploding in the way that Farage often does. And I did feel a week ago that maybe we're getting to that, because Farage held a press conference not so long ago at which he started making all sorts of tax and spending promises which make Liz Truss look positively frugal. I mean, it's not just removing the 2-child benefit cap, which I think Starmer may well do anyway. It was raising the basic rate of tax to 20,000, which is the Institute for Fiscal Studies estimates to cost the country about 80 billion quid. I mean, that is a sort of terrifying amount of money. That's an unfunded tax cut. And we've no idea where it's coming from. And Farage doesn't have any idea. So I think we're again in in the shadowlands where Farage's greatest enemy may not turn out to be Keir Starmer. It might turn out to be Nigel Farage.
There's a gentleman who's over here somewhere. Somebody put up their hand. And, there we go. Sorry. Having asked you what you had, I then forgot. But
So is there anyone amongst the current crop of politicians who gives you hope that they can be the saviour and get us out of our current predicament? Anybody you respect, you might think, comes through?
That's a really difficult one. I'm not overburdened with hope.
Is there anyone you admire, perhaps, rather than a saviour? Is there any? I did admire Rachel Reeves. I did feel, and I often wrote about her as Shadow Chancellor, that, you know, if she got her feet in the Treasury, she would be a square peg in a square hole. She was a former Bank of England economist and at last we would have a Chancellor who understood how macroeconomics works. But I'm afraid that she's made a number of errors. I mean, not least one of which was tying her hands behind her back before the last election. She was so worried about the right-wing press portraying her as a tax and spend chancellor that she made a promise not to raise national insurance, VAT, or income tax, when it would have been the sensible answer for any shadow chancellor would be, I'm not going to make any fiscal commitments until I've seen the state of the economy, until I'm actually in the Treasury. That's what shadow chancellors have been saying for years, and it has the virtue of sounding plausible. But instead, she made all these tax commitments and then found herself with a £20 billion black hole to fill, and hence the national insurance on employers going up, a loss in business confidence, hit to growth, and has given Labour a fairly rocky start. Whereas, I mean, it seems to me that the easiest thing she could have done would have been to go in and say, look, Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor cut national insurance by 4%, 2%, and then another 2% the following year. And she could have said, frankly, that was a tax giver. It was an election bribe that the country couldn't afford, and I'm going to reinstate 2p of that, just half of it. And that would have cleared the £20 billion black hole immediately. And I don't think anyone would have objected to that. And so that would have been one way round it. But, I mean, if you're looking for a Labour politician who is actually enjoying himself and doing well, and that is Ed Miliband. I sort of admire him for it, because he wasn't a very good leader of the Labour Party. But rather than storm off in a huff and go off and get a much better paid job in business, he stayed behind, stayed as a Labour MP, worked first as a shadow minister for Jeremy Corbyn and then Keir Starmer, and now understands energy security and net zero better than many, I mean, almost everyone else in government. And he's also blessed that having an opposite number of Claire Coutinho.
who is a half-wit.
I should say that Herbie's reaction to Ed Miliband's Ed Stone, which I'd forgotten when he was leader, is very, very funny and worth...
the Ed Stone was a disaster.
The Ed Stone was worth reading. I mean, just quick follow-up on that, John. I mean, if out of 650 MPs you struggle to think of two, I mean, what's gone wrong? I mean, it's unpopular, but one argument is they're very badly paid. I did scan the room to make sure my boss isn't here, but up in Scotland there was just a parliamentary inquiry, and they had the VC of Edinburgh on, and they pointed out that the VC of Edinburgh's salary is more than the combined salary of the First Minister of Scotland and the Prime Minister of the UK. So is that the problem? You're not attracting high-quality people because they can earn gazoodles more elsewhere?
I would say, I mean, on my sort of... I am also getting to know still the new intake. There are a whole realm of MPs that I just don't know. Backbenchers. I mean, there might be some really talented ones there that they just haven't crossed my...
Yeah.
I can assure you there's none on the Tory benches, as far as I can see, but there may be. And I mean, I'm not wholly persuaded by the, hard-upness of MPs, really. I mean, your average backbencher gets 85 grand, roughly, which I think is and there are expenses for travelling to constituency and for running a constituency office. I mean, it's not untold riches, but you're meant to be in it for public service. And I have been reading Sarah Vine's book about being married to Michael Gove. And she does go on a bit too much about Michael took such a pay cut to be, as if we're meant to feel sorry for him, really. He went off to be, and it was terrible because he wasn't allowed to... David Cameron stopped him from writing for the Times. You want to think, well, you stopped him from doing another job. So I don't feel... Right. I mean, I think there are arguments to be made that they could be paid a bit more, but I don't think we should be kind of putting them into sort of vice-chancellor stratosphere.
And I couldn't possibly comment on whether it works. There's a gentleman in the blue jumper up there, and then we'll take two people from the front, and that'll probably see us.
Thank you. Before your dog, very sadly, I'm sorry, passed away, he did at least live long enough to see a Labour government. But having seen it, did he think that Keir Starmer was any less empty than David Cameron and Boris Johnson?
He was disappointed, put it that way. I mean, I think it's a tough one. I think because you can't completely ignore the economic inheritance that Labour were left to pick up after sort of 14 years. I mean, we'd had 14 years of no growth and underfunding of public services. And I think even if Keir Starmer had hit the ground running, he would have really struggled to produce, to turn the economy around that quickly. I mean, the Tories go, oh, it was a mess, but come on. I mean, the right-wing press were never going to give Keir Starmer any benefit of the doubt. And so he has had a lot of negative headlines to contend with. And, we have got a health service that is still in crisis. That said, I think he has been too charismatic, too technocratic, and he hasn't really sold us with a vision of what kind of country he wants us to have and he's trying to build. And I think that is the tragedy, really. And again, I think there was this feeling with Labour in the run-up to the election. I mean, I don't generally make predictions, but even I could see from 2 years out, from after Liz Truss, from after Partygate, that Labour were going to win the next election. I felt that that was what's going to happen. And so I would have expected the Labour to have made a plan for government, really, of what they wanted to do. But it seemed that they were so focused on trying, they couldn't allow themselves to believe they were going to win the election, that all their energy went into winning the election. And so there was this period after they got elected, the 3-month window, when they should have come out all guns blazing. But they didn't. They seemed to do nothing. And that was exemplified by the fact that we didn't even get a budget until the end of October. They should have come in with a budget, after about 6 weeks. And that would have given us a sense of direction, a sense of mission. And even when Keir Starmer does talk about my mission, his mission statements, they're sort of, every sentence just sort of dies on his lips, really. And I can't remember what they are by the time he's finished his speech.
He should have inscribed them on a stone. Right. Because I want to get I'm going to get two questions and then give you the last word, John. So there's a lady in the middle here somewhere, and there's a lady in the middle there. There was somebody in the... No? Okay, let's go for the lady in there, then, please. I must be imagining things. This is slightly worrying, but...
Hello.
Hello.
Present company accepted, a lot of the population seemed to be less politically informed than Herbie seemed to be. Many people consider what they think are their own grievances, whipped up by the right-wing press. And so many of the younger generation seem to be influenced by the likes of TikTok and Instagram. How are we going to get people to be into a state where they are knowledgeable and wise enough to elect a government who actually works for the benefit of the country?
It's a small question to answer, John. How do we change the people? They keep.
At which point I have to say I'm a sketch writer, not... I mean, the simple answer is I don't know. I mean, you've elucidated the problem perfectly, really. I mean, I think one of the problems is governments tend to act in the short term because they think in 4 to 5 year cycles about getting themselves elected. And I mean, that's why I kind of worry about energy security and net zero, because it's one of those things that get moved into the long grass, and it gets difficult when 2 years out from a general election, parties tend to look for quick wins, things that are going to turn around the economy quickly rather than are actually needed for a long-term prosperity. And I mean, social media is a nightmare. I mean, we've seen, just this week, Donald Trump using his Truth Social media platform to badmouth Elon Musk, and Elon Musk using X or Twitter to badmouth Donald Trump. And, it's not... And the rest of the, I mean, you know, America is suffering, and, you know, when America suffers, the rest of the world suffers as well. I mean, we may wake up to more tariffs, more God knows what. And I don't know how you get round that. I genuinely don't. I mean, I think it is an existential problem for us.
Okay, I don't want to end on that note, so will you get another dog?
Not yet. I will. I feel that 10 days may have been suitable national mourning for the Queen. I feel rather longer for. And also, you know, it's got to be the right dog. I mean, Herbie's one feeling about the book was that he felt that I'd trivialized his life. So I think I'm going to have to be sent to sort of dog education school.
Right, so before I thank John, just to remind you, and please let John go at the end. I know there's an inclination to come down and ask questions, but he needs to get outside to sign, because you will be able to buy the book from Fox Lane Books outside, and John will be there to sign them. As ever, can I just say thank you to two groups of people before I thank John. First, to you. The Festival of Ideas is great because the audiences make it great, and as ever, it's fantastic to have such an engaged group of people. Second, the Festival of Ideas runs, I imagine, from the outside seamlessly, and like everything that runs seamlessly, that's just because of the huge amounts of work that go on in the background. The festival team is small, but it is extraordinary, and we all have reason to thank it for what it does every single year in York. But finally, can I thank John for a fabulous talk? Thank you.